Good evening. Our internal conflicts, it seems, are moving beyond the bounds of the Commonwealth and are attracting more and more attention in the world. In Nagorno-Karabakh, the war rages between two states of the Commonwealth, two members of the United Nations. Fighting is underway for control of Agdan in Asgaran. The 366th Regiment has been removed from Nagorno-Karabakh. In Yerevan, the Armenian Supreme Soviet is discussing the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. In the Moldovan city of Benderi, the Mediation Committee has renewed its work to resolve the conflict in Pridnistrov. The chairman of the Tatarstan Supreme Soviet made an appeal to the population of his republic on the coming referendum on independence. Today, not only the states of the Commonwealth are moving apart, the autonomous regions within it are doing the same. Will Russia share the fate of the Soviet Union? Will we have dozens of Karabakhs and Moldovas on a smaller scale? The solution is the adoption of a new constitution. Now, in Russia, they are using the constitution of 1978, although with some amendments made in recent years. But the world is changing. The new draft constitution contains powers for the republic which it previously lacked. If you try to determine the sphere of issues facing the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation, its work today was mainly oriented toward preparing for April's Congress of People's Deputies. As we know, it will open on the 6th of the month. We understand that the Congress will produce results only in conditions of national accord. And because of this, Ruslan Khasbulatov sharply denounced the idea of calling a Congress of People's Deputies of the nations of the former Soviet Union. This, of course, would be the propaganda of hostility, definitely and absolutely. This would be an attempt to show that all this happened illegally, to elect a mythical head for a state which does not exist. As you know, the President has spoken out, and I spoke out at the trade union conference on the need to achieve a type of social peace and civil accord, to bring together the positions of various people in order to stop the separation of ourselves into black and white and brown, etc. You know that we are decisively taking this position. And incidentally, the adoption of the draft constitution will be an important element promoting this kind of unity. The draft constitution is distinguished by its high level of maturity and preparation, according to the Chief Secretary of the Constitutional Commission, Oleg Rumyantsev. In his opinion, the adoption of the constitution will prevent the collapse of the Russian Federation. However, its adoption should be preceded by agreements between the republics on delimiting their powers and the powers of the center. The participants of the press conference did not hide their opinion that the Congress of People's Deputies can expect heated debates. As a minimum, the Congress should adopt the Constitution on first reading. In case this fails, its authors plan to make a direct appeal to the citizens of the Russian Federation by holding a referendum on the draft Constitution. In Bashkortostan, the Supreme Soviet has tabled the draft Constitution of the Russian Federation, according to the Nyega news agency. In Tataria, the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of that republic addressed his people. In his speech, he called the referendum a decisive step on the path toward democracy. This is a chance for a new, just, and mutually beneficial relations between the peoples of Russia. The Supreme Soviet of Tatarstan considers the referendum an inalienable constitutional right of the people and categorically rejects accusations of separatism. They promise the people blessing and prosperity as soon as Tatarstan gains independence. Economic motives were paramount when the republics fought for secession from the Soviet Union. They believed that having escaped the dictates of the center, they would begin to live better. But no one's life has improved. That's obvious now. And the secession of Tatarstan from Russia, which could be the result of this referendum, would not likely improve the population's standard of living. Along all the borders of Nagorno-Karabakh, defensive battles are raging between Karabakh self-defense forces and the attacking National Army of Azerbaijan. Especially fierce fighting unfolded today around the cities of Agdan and Asgaran. Last night, guns and rockets were again fired there. There are casualties. The Nagorno-Karabakh Supreme Soviet Press Center issued a declaration today expressing hope for a political solution to the conflict. It became known today that the 366th Regiment has entirely withdrawn from Nagorno-Karabakh. The landing forces have also withdrawn. They succeeded in taking with them nearly all their military equipment. Today, the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Azerbaijan, Yakub Mamedov, who is acting as head of state, spoke to the Azerbaijani people on television. He said that it is necessary to prepare a platform for relations with the countries of the Commonwealth of Independent States and the world community. This report will not be seen in Armenia because of the increasingly severe energy crisis. Television broadcasting has been totally suspended here. As of today, the residents of the Republic no longer receive gas in their homes. All industrial enterprises are also without gas. Even bread factories have no fuel. Lines like this one are forming at all stores. Yesterday afternoon, in a densely populated neighborhood of Yerevan, there was a powerful explosion. According to specialists, the source of the tragedy was a garage containing large amounts of flammable materials. 20 people died in the explosion. According to information available today, over 50 are seriously wounded. All the victims, including nearly all the residents of 3 surrounding 5-story apartment buildings, have been given temporary housing. The cause of the tragedy is being investigated by a government commission. The Armenian prosecutor has opened a criminal case on the explosion. This just in, the French and Turkish governments have called on the warring sides in Nagorno-Karabakh to cease fire. Turkey's top diplomat, Hikmet Çetin, discussed the problem in Nagorno-Karabakh by telephone with U.S. Secretary of State James Baker. He asked the U.S. government to play a more active role in solving the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. The situation in the Commonwealth is ceasing to be entirely our internal affair. Whether this is good or bad, we don't know. Since the former republics of the Soviet Union, now the sovereign countries, received recognition from the world community and became equal members of the United Nations, our wars and conflicts on the territories of these republics have ceased to be only their internal affair. This explains the concern of our closest neighbors, for example Turkey, over this situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. It's another matter that this interest sometimes takes unexpected forms. The Turkish president said recently, for example, that Armenians should be intimidated. This is the first time a direct analogy was made between Karabakh and Cyprus. We remind you that having occupied the northern part of this island, Ankara has already begun making changes in the demographic situation there and continues to resettle Turks there from the continent. Or another example, according to the Itar-Tas news agency, Iran has spent over $5 million on establishing its influence in the former Soviet republics of Central Asia. Should this be seen as a creeping interference in internal affairs? The sovereign states themselves must decide this, but one thing is clear. Everyone in the world around us clearly understands their long-term strategic interests and can act in strict accordance with them. When the same thing can be said of the countries of our Commonwealth, then we will become genuinely respected members of the world community, and the fears of becoming totally dependent will recede by themselves. In the Moldovan city of Bendera today, there was a meeting of the mediation committee held to resolve the conflict in Pridnestrov. Specialists have been commissioned to develop and present a schedule for withdrawal of armed forces from the region. Speaking today on national radio, Moldovan President Snegur declared that in recent days, tension has increased in the left bank regions of the Republic. The Moldovan press office reports that the situation in Pridnestrov remains tense, but no new conflicts have occurred. The Moldovan Ministry of National Security accused the armed units in Pridnestrov of terrorist acts against units of the CIS, our 14th Army. As proof, they pointed to the capture of an officer of the 14th Army, Colonel Stepankov, yesterday. He was struck on the head with a pistol and taken away in an unknown direction. Late last night, the colonel was released. The Ministry of National Security demanded that the right bank armed forces immediately turn over their weapons. Today, at the Ostankino television company, there was a meeting with members of the Moldovan parliament. In Zugdidi, in the center of western Georgia, battles continue continued today. Helicopters carried National Guardsmen there from Tbilisi. Supporters of Gamsahurdia set off an explosion in the building of the Internal Affairs Ministry in Zugdidi. There are casualties. Today in the Georgian capital, unidentified people armed with automatic weapons attacked correspondents of the Itartas news agency. Afterwards, the bandits escaped in unmarked cars. Tbilisi is a surprising city, and its charm is not spoiled today even by the burned-out facades or tanks on the streets. But the city is sick. There is no hot water, homes are cold, fuel deliveries and contact with Moscow are cut off. The military commandant of the city accompanies our car, but even with his help we could not take pictures of yesterday's anti-Shevardnadze demonstration. There were few demonstrators, only about 500 people, but it still reminds us that the situation in the Republic and the capital are far from stable. We attended the funeral of 2 guardsmen who died in the shooting with bandits. This is not a rare occurrence. We need some